in the walls, inherited ghosts, holiday garland, and being ambushed by forgiveness. I had all these plans to write a little informational post for you all about how I lead clients through exploring shadow work alongside the horses. But in the nature of all good shadow work, my expectations collided with reality. Shadow work has a sense of irony. You don't have to go looking for it. It just finds you. Since July, my father has lived with us on hospice. He and my mother split 40 years ago, but she and my husband have stepped up to help me provide 24/7 care for Dad. I've spent a lot of time talking about how hard it was to lose our lease on the old farm, make a mad dash to purchase property, and transition 2 decades of accumulated equipment and our herd of 16 horses. I've spent a lot of time talking about how hard it was to lose Sheba, a member of that herd, in a horrific accident on the trailer ride to the new farm. What I haven't spent enough time talking about is how hard all of this was to do with my father bedridden and at the mercy of the mad sea tide of our move. And what I decided to do with the man who was driving the trailer that Sheba was riding on the day she died. This week, I'm handing you the example of my own shadow work in an effort to let you know that you are not alone and the answer you most need will find you each and every time. But it doesn't always feel like rightness when you're in the thick of things. I don't have an easy relationship with my father. There was an expectation that I would get married, have children, and stay at home to keep the house. I don't know where he got this idea because his own mother worked, spent major spans of her life hospitalized for depression and eating disorders, and seldom cooked or cleaned. My father's father was an exonerated murderer, and I spent a summer driving into his story so I could write the chapters of my family's dark history. I discovered that he and my grandmother were never truly married and that my grandfather had abandoned a family in Georgia before moving to upstate South Carolina. My grandparents met at Krispy Kreme Donuts, a city staple that is still standing and still turning the light on when the donuts are fresh out of the oven. My grandmother worked there, and my grandfather was a taxi driver who wooed her over coffee and conversation while she was on shift. Another ancestral tidbit I uncovered while researching my father's family was that his mother had been married and divorced once before, which was extraordinarily rare for a woman in her position as World War II drew to a close. As we moved to the new farm and Sheba died in transit, the location where my grandparents met is notable because my horse took her last breath across the street from Krispy Kreme. A retired police officer sat in the donut shop parking lot watching over one of my clients who refused to leave Sheba's side. The retired cop sat there watching over the client until the men arrived to remove Sheba's body. As for me, I chose to be a writer and to work full-time in the horse industry. I married and divorced, and because I needed my lesson repeated until it stuck, I did the same thing again. My father felt this was scandalous and retreated into a world of his own. I left him living in that world until health and finances gave him no choice but to move in with me, my mother, and my husband. We've been navigating the new dynamic and doing amazingly well, if I do say so myself. You see, the thing is, I hold grudges. I want to believe in the best of people, but I have very little trust in reformation. I'll give you a long chance to show your true colors, but when you spite me, you're done. I won't announce my exit. I'll just slip slowly into the shadows. Shadow work is relatively easy for Scorpios. It's the light that we have a hard time finding, noticing, and dwelling in. The first moment I slipped out of my father's life was when he was in ICU, recovering from a traffic accident, the result of unfettered prescriptions and a rich fantasy life. He got into his car in the middle of the night and told the officers that he was on his way to see the dentist. I rushed in to do damage control after the accident as my father healed in the hospital. He would never fully walk again, and his arduous treatment for invasive melanoma abruptly stopped. As I sat beside his bed in the ICU, he described in detail the monkeys that he saw crawling on the wall. And that was the first moment I became aware of what urinary tract infections can do to a person. It wasn't the accident or the surgeries or the withdrawal from an arsenal of anxiety meds that pushed him to break with reality. It was a UTI. To make my family tree even more confusing, I was raised by my mother's father, and he also founded the Alzheimer's Association in upstate South Carolina, back when the organization was grassroots and the National Association was just getting started. It has since merged with my grandfather's brainchild. My grandmother had a rare form of early onset Alzheimer's, so I was well versed in living alongside alternate realities. One would think that my father's monkeys would be well received. But the monkeys were my breaking point. I informed the rest of the family that I would be available to handle anything on the business side for my father, but I could not cope with his daily care. I managed from a distance until he moved in with me last July. Through all the madness of the move, the uprooting, the safe landing, and the getting settled into a new routine of the new/historic farm, my father has been wildly coherent and functional. He's put on weight, he eats and sleeps on a schedule, he's sassy and witty. Deep, deep healing has happened in the fractures of my family as we care for him daily. It's been a miracle to watch. But this weekend, his proverbial monkeys came back. And he is now seeing cats crawling through the walls. He tries to stand and walk. He cannot. He has no idea what day it is. He's having conversations with his dead father. I have some questions for his father, and I'm hoping to get some answers. Mom, Christopher, and I are on a tag team schedule. We help as much as we can, tap out, and keep our worlds moving around my father's delusions. It was at this point that I decided that it was absolutely incredibly important for us to decorate the farmhouse for Christmas. I'd previously decided that Christmas could come and go and we'd be fine, but as my father spiraled, it became essential that we hang wreaths from the windows, garland on the stairs, create elaborate seasonal arrangements, light candles in the windows, and generally go as deeply Biltmore estate as the season would allow us. That's when Christopher told me it was time to well and truly forgive the driver who failed to care for Sheba while transporting her to our new farm. This wasn't the first time Christopher had spoken to me directly about forgiveness, and I've learned that he is seldom wrong with his timing. Sunday morning, I received a text including a bunch of screenshots and a link to a GoFundMe. A child was injured on a horse in a Christmas parade, and the buzz on social media brought out many well wishes and a flood of judgment from the person whose decisions killed my horse. He accused the child's family of being irresponsible, of not doing their duty. He pointed out how the accident was preventable. A child's family member responded back to the hauler saying, "I pray when you are at your lowest and in need of a miracle, someone shows you sympathy at the very least, whether you deserve it or not, based on what I surmise your character to be." The comment in the midst of a social media battle touched something inside me that had nothing to do with the man driving my horse and everything to do with the lineage of all the people that came before me, the grievances and the anger they took with them to the grave that shaped the world I was born into. Because long before Sheba drew her last breath in front of the donut shop, and long before a stranger online handed out the compassion the driver refused to give, there was the brutal and uncertain house my father was born into. With his mother's mind slipping and his father choosing the dark and easy way out, my father never learned how to navigate the world with compassion to himself and to others. I grew up in the aftershocks of all their choices, absorbing patterns that weren't mine and carrying grievances that began decades before I took my first breath, as we all do. The only way out is to break the cycle, to lean into forgiveness, to let go. And maybe that's why this comment on the internet hit me the way it did. I wasn't letting go of anger towards one man by forgiving the driver. I was finally laying down the generational debris that I've been hauling around like bruised, dusty luggage my entire life. I cannot change other people's actions, but I can absolutely change my own. Forgiveness isn't a single act or a blessing bestowed on the other party. It begins by recognizing you're living in the boulder field of other people's unfinished stories. As you move forward, you begin to honor the experiences that brought you to this moment without mistaking where you are for where you're going. Even the most broken histories can become soil if you stop clutching the dust long enough to let it settle into the ground. Back on the farm, my father hears cats walking through the walls. This is a step up from monkeys, and I'm happy for this because monkeys freak me out. The cats are walking in the walls, Dad says. My mother pipes in, I know, isn't this house amazing? The cats can go all over the place. As for me, if we have to live through all of this together, we could not have landed in a more beautiful place than Lavender Hill. The land holds us, protects us, and reminds us that it held 2 centuries of other people's stories before the farm opened its doors to us, but is still uniquely its own. I love learning the new secrets it shows me every day. But it would be super cool if the cats really did walk around in the walls. I imagine them traveling through an elaborate network of tunnels like how street cats live subterranean lives in the storm drains. This farm didn't ask to be preserved in amber. It asked to be lived in, to be allowed to become something new without betraying what it once was. And somewhere in that parallel is the lesson I've been avoiding most of my life. Honoring the past doesn't require dragging its weight into every room of my life. My family had a hard time forgiving people. That doesn't mean that I have to carry the torch. So instead of the clean, instructive post I meant to write this week, you're getting this sermon delivered through an internet stranger and sharpened by the ghost of my father's family. I leave you with the reminder that forgiveness, the lived-in, earth-heavy kind, is about loosening your grip on the narratives you inherited, the anger you didn't originate, and the patterns you no longer consent to repeat. Just like this farm, you get to honor the history that brought you here without treating it as a cage. We're allowed to transform, forgive, and move on. And that forgiveness we offer extends outward to the people and situations that you most want to hate. It seems trite and cliche, but I'm living proof that even the hardest-headed person can learn new ways. If you're standing in your own shadowy place right now as you feel the pull of old stories that want you rooted in the wrong soil, know this: you're allowed to let them go. You're allowed to put them on the shelf like an old, pretty book that you admire for the binding. You're allowed to let your life, your actual, breathing, present tense life, become the place where the past finally composts into something fertile, abundant, and rich. The work finds us right where we are, even when we swear we're not ready. Maybe more so when we don't feel we're ready. And once it finds you, you're already on your way. I'll meet you there. Love, Kim.